I'll start by kind of, talking about kind of our company and, how we build the team, the people analytics team at WeWork, and then we're going to go into a few projects that we've worked on. We'll talk about who we are, the people analytics framework, the projects, and we'll talk about the distance study that we did, and if we have some time, I'll go into a little bit into the network analysis that we're working on currently. Let's go into it. So first of all, who are we? The We company started in 2010 with Adam, Miguel, and then we've grown into a large company with 14,000 employees, right? We have over 500,000 members. We have over 500 locations in 29 countries. We've acquired a few companies over the years. We have different ventures like Rise by We, which is our gym. WeWork Labs, we've literally kind of expanded to over 100 cities. And so with a growing organization like ours, what happens is, we're talking about 14,000 employees over the last few years. When I joined, to give you context, when I joined the organization about almost 2.5 years ago, we were about 2,000 employees, right? So like 2.5 years later, we are where we are now. And so, kind of giving that context is, as the organization grew, we as a people analytics team kind of had to kind of grow to kind of keep up with the pace of the organization as a whole, right? So just kind of giving you a little bit of context, kind of how we've grown and where we are and who we are as a company. So looking at the growth, we're talking about 3 employees to about 14,000 employees in like 10 years. We had the 1 HQ location, and now we have 20 plus HQ locations for our employees. And so that kind of starts to give us an interesting, problem in terms of, when we start thinking of things around network analysis and things like that. Like you're looking at like different locations and people working out of different places in the world. That's actually an interesting problem to solve for when you think about network analysis and like how people collaborate in the organization and things like that. And then of course, the memberships going from 450 to over 400,000 memberships. So it's interesting, right? Because as we've grown as an organization, when we started thinking about the people analytics team, this was in 2017. So sometime early 2017, when I joined the organization, there wasn't any people analytics function. It was just an idea at the time. And for us, we thought about it we had this framework of how we wanted to kind of achieve what we wanted to achieve as a people analytics function, right? And that started out for me with data engineering, right? So I don't know how many of you know, when you guys start working in people analytics in your organizations, you talk to people and they're like, oh, where's the data? People are like, oh, in Excel sheets. Or I'm like, this is horrific, right? I nearly jumped out the window when I heard that. I was like, you have PI on Google Sheets, like what the heck is going on here, right? But that's everywhere. Like, we're starting this whole thing and, we are still new in the journey of people analytics compared to other analytics domains. So it's understandable. And so for me, I think one of the most important things was data engineering aspect. So we started with that, right? And I will say this now, that is for us the secret sauce for a lot of things that we have done, and I'll explain why that is. Talking to some of colleagues across industry, I keep hearing that, we work with our IT teams to get the data. There's all these things going on, and that takes longer to get a lot of things achieved, right? And so for us, it was important that we had people analytics. In people analytics, we had the data engineering team in people analytics, and so we started with building that out, right? So in terms of this infrastructure, like creating a database. Now we call it data lake, fancy terms. But creating databases, connecting to different sources of truth, different sources like Workday, your survey tools, things like that. And then we built from there, right? And then we went to decision sciences. And what that means for us was building like products that people actually use, right? So when I say that, I mean like your dashboards, your models, things like that. We started building products. And then eventually, and that's kind of why I like things like this events where we gather together and talk to people, because you learn from people, you learn what amazing things they're doing. Because I was talking to people, and for the longest time we were focused on just like systems, dashboards. And someone said to me, it's like, yeah, we actually have an IO psychologist on our team, and we do all this, things around outcomes. And I was like, yeah, we should probably do that, right? And so we went back and we hired our first IO psychology researcher on our team. She's amazing. And then, of course, now we're now kind of going to the machine learning space, right? So, but over time, we took our time with kind of, first of all, building the infrastructure and delivering products, and then we start going into things around the outcomes, and then now we want to go into the predictive space as well. That's kind of what we started doing. But that started out with a vision, right? So it's important to kind of start with that, right? For us, it was just like we knew that we eventually wanted to go to a place whereby we were trying to understand how employees were feeling or predicting, or there's so many things we wanted to go, what we wanted to achieve. But we were like, look, the vision is we want to create an infrastructure, first of all, to enable any of those things to happen. And then we want to build a team. And finally, we want to actually enable self-service analytics, right? So we were at a place whereby for us to be able to do self-service analytics, we had to have the right infrastructures in place to do that, right? So, and a lot of times, you're going to hear throughout the conference and throughout the years, you're going to hear, resume recommendation or O&A and all this cool stuff, and that's all well and good, but it goes for you to be able to do anything like that, you actually need the right infrastructure. Otherwise, forget it. You're chasing shadows. So for us, that's kind of how we started thinking about that. And throughout that whole process for us, we were always partnering with the business, because I always say to the team, we joke about it all the time, we don't care if you use the fanciest models if you're not solving any business problem. If someone on my team says, I can build this model with X, Y, I did this model, I'm like, I don't care. Are we solving a problem? And if we aren't solving a business problem, then it really doesn't matter what models we use. And I think we have to always be cognizant of that as well. So that's kind of how we've thought about it over time. So the next thing I want to talk about is the employee lifecycle. So as we think about all our, we have the infrastructure, we have a team, we understand the roadmap. We started thinking, well, what are we trying to achieve here, right? What are we trying to do in people analytics as a company? For us, it's in 5 stages. I think about it in 5 stages. We've said, look, we look at the employee lifecycle, and all our projects, for one reason or another, should fall into one of those buckets or multiple of the buckets, right? But for us, we think about it from the recruiting, onboarding, development, retention, and offboarding stage. And so that way, we are always thoughtful. If someone if my boss, an executive, comes and says to me, hey, Joseph, I want X, Y, Z done, I'm always thinking, okay, where does that fall and how does that impact the employee, right? And usually it should fall into one of those buckets. Always being thoughtful. So that's kind of how we define the employee life cycle at WeWork. So we've talked about the employee life cycle. We've talked about we've built the systems, we've built the process. And we want to talk about some of the projects we've worked on, right? Because I think it's important, we're gonna hear about amazing things people are doing, and that's all well and good. But, for us, we were trying to tackle projects that are hard-hitting and that are actually impactful to the organization. And so we did a few projects around distance study, which I'll go into, things around network analysis, workforce planning, and onboarding effectiveness. This is just a few projects. We've worked on a lot of projects, but I just want to point out some of the projects that we have worked on. And then some of the tools we use, usually I think most people probably be using the same stack, but for data processing, we had Airflow, R, Python, data visualization, Tableau D3, surveys, Qualtrics, and for network analysis, we're using Workalytics for our networks. So throughout the last 2 years for us, we've had a few challenges. And two of the ones I want to point out was perception, right? People analytics, for a lot of people, believe it or not, is still unknown. You have new business partners that come to the organization, or executives, and you ask them, they see all the analysis you're doing, and there's this whole perception about kind of what exactly you're doing, is it? And so we always have to be, we have to kind of always think about how do we kind of communicate to our stakeholders, right? And that's such an important thing. So because people have different perceptions, and so everything we do, we start out with, okay, well, what are we trying to achieve, and how do we communicate this to the stakeholders? Because that's such an important thing, and that helps build the trust. Because, believe it or not, of course, there is sensitivity around data that we have, right? It's the whole thing about confidentiality, anonymity, everything, right? So, always kind of having that clear communication and how we're using the data is such an important thing, because if there's no trust, then really forget it, right? Like, you can build the coolest models, or people are gonna be like, we're not sure of this, right? And then you shelve it, and then you're not really bringing any value to the organization, right? So those are some things that we've had over time, but that's something that we've managed to build and say, hey, look, this is kind of what we're doing. This is the outcome. This is to help you. We're not taking away your jobs, things like that. Because you're trying to automate this. Oh, whoa, what are you trying to do? It's like, yeah, I understand. Like, we're not trying to take away your job. We're trying to help you be more efficient and kind of seek and have those collaborations, right? And so one of the tricks that I learned from actually one of my colleagues, Paul, Liberty Mutual, and he was saying that he basically makes the stakeholder feel like it's their idea, right? And then I'm like, that is perfect. So we go to the stakeholder, I'm like, this is what we're trying to do. And they're like, oh, this is this. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. We'll do it the way you want, but we do what we have the idea, but we make them feel like it's their idea. And it was amazing. I was like, this is genius, right? And that has worked for us over time. And so, that I think that's such an amazing thing. So, in thinking about kind of, how we've scaled, because as a team, think about how we've grown. We've grown from, one person, then 2, 3 to about 15 people on our team, right, over the last 2 years. So we have about 15 and growing, right? And so you think about, okay, well, how have we grown the team, and how have we kind of gone from literally no platform to like self-service, real time, all of those things running. I think one of the ways we did it was the proof of concept. I need to stress this. I think this is such a powerful thing for us. And it was actually one of the managers on our team, Gabe, that actually he said that quite a few times. I'm like, oh, that actually does make sense. Anytime an executive came to us and said, we want to do an analysis of a stakeholder, we looked at it on 2 dimensions. We looked at the business need and the data readiness. Simple. If there wasn't a business need, even though we had the amazing data on whatever it was, we were not going to do it. It just didn't make sense to do it at the time, because we have to kind of pick and choose our projects, right? Like, it's just, and even if like there was like, we had to look and say, okay, look, data ready, if data is ready, but it's not a business need, no need. If it's not a business need and data is ready, like, we had to kind of look at it on those 2 dimensions. And so, for example, the example I have here for this study was there was a high business need and data was ready for us to do the analysis, and we did it, right? And so, but when we choose to do the analysis, what we do is we create a proof of concept. We don't go and create a full product. So we create a proof of concept, we give it to the stakeholder, they use it, they look at it, they kind of give us feedback. We go back, we add the feedback to it, they'll show them again the version 2 and 3, and you get to a point where maybe you've had like 4 or 5 versions, but the product is being used by the end user, and they feel like they're part of building it as well. So that's such a powerful thing in everything we do. So if you can imagine, we have a whole chart with all our projects, and we kind of fall into this quadrants in terms of where they fall, and we focus more on the top quadrant, of course. And then we kind of go from there. So that's kind of one of the ways we've looked at things, and that's enabled us to kind of really grow quickly. We've been able to get kind of the resources because they see, okay, we're doing work that is actually being used as well. Okay, so I'll go into the distance study, which I think this was one of the, at the time when we did it, it was an idea for us, right? We were like, oh, we want to do this, and then we never knew how much of an impact that would have on the organizations. It was such a simple and interesting project, but it ended up kind of blowing up, and such an amazing thing because we're bringing value to the business. So what happened was one of our executives came and said, hey, look, we're trying to move employees from one of our HQs to a different HQ. We have 4 HQs in mind that we want to keep the employees, but I think I'm going to go with this one HQ. Is there going to be any any impact on the employees. The fact that he came and asked us that question was actually amazing in itself. It shows that we've gone from an organization with literally nothing to like, hey, we want to make an organization we're going to make a decision that's going to affect the organization or affect our employees. Can you give us data around this? Any insights would be amazing, right? So we went from 0 to that in 2 years. That is amazing, right? For me, I was like even blown away by that question. I was like, yeah, we can look at this. Because if you want to move your employees, you don't want to move your employees from a place where the average commute is like 20 minutes to a place where the average commute is about an hour. That will really affect their happiness, right? I wouldn't be happy with that. So we're like, okay, yeah, sure. And so what we did was we looked at the HQs, we looked at the average time traveled for the employees to each of the HQs. We looked at some more analysis, in-depth analysis as well, and I'll give our recommendations. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the employees that we looked at we had like about 3,000 employees that lived in the tri-state area, right? And so they want to move these 3,000 employees from one HQ to another HQ. And we had 4 in mind. And so what we did was we took essentially the addresses of the employees, right? Geocoded it right into the Google API, and then we mapped it to each of the four locations. And we saw so we have the min time and you have the maximum time. That's fine, but we're more focused on the average time, right? And so what we did was we saw like, okay, well, the first HQ we had about 38 minutes of an average travel time. But as we kind of went down, we realized that the fourth HQ, which was the one that actually he had in mind, he thought was the best idea, was actually 57 minutes on average, which means that on the other side of the distribution, we had people that were going to be like it was going to be crazy. And so immediately I was like, wow, this is insane, right? And so we're like, well, let's break it down by teams to see if there's any variation between teams, right? And when we did, the theme remained the same, right? So when we broke it down by the 12 teams that we had for this particular set of employees, literally for the most part, it was pretty similar. So we realized that, wow, like the HQ1 was literally the best, and HQ4 progressively got worse, and it was uniform across the board. We were like, okay, well, like for sure, there's no ways that we're gonna, it didn't make sense to kind of have anyone in HQ4, and so, which was interesting to see by teams. And then we went one step further. We were like, okay, well, let's look at the number of employees that have an average time of like 0 to 30 minutes commute, 30 to an hour, and so on and so forth, right? And we can see here, for example, that for 0 to 30, the HQ1 that's about half of the employees were in 0 to 30 travel time. And as it got, then you realized by HQ4, it's about only 11% of the employees were there. And then we said, okay, well, let's look at number of employees that had over an hour travel time. For HQ1, it was about 17%, and then by HQ4, it was about 32%. So it basically almost doubled in terms of the number of employees. At that point, it was just clear. We're like, look, HQ1's the best, right? Like it's just, and then if you don't think HQ1, then you can go with HQ2, but definitely not HQ4 as they had in mind, because it's just like, oh, this design is great. I'm like, screw the design, right? Who cares? Like this is actually employees traveling to these places. This is going to affect them. So we're like, no. And so we did the impact, right? So we realized, okay, well, we HQ1 again. But it was 38 minutes, plus 2 minutes, plus 7, and plus 19 minutes. So basically, the percentage increase is basically 50% increase between HQ1 and HQ4, right? Now, it was interesting. And so when we looked at it, we gave our recommendation. We were like, look, the optimal location is HQ1, followed by HQ2. That's it. Now, this was the interesting thing, because they were like, yeah, we're going to do HQ4, right? Let us know. And we showed them this, and it was like, we're like, oh no, screw that. We're going to do HQ1. Like, let's just leave them here for now. This is what it is. And that was the reaction. Immediately they were like, this is horrific. Like, we can't do HQ4. And that was the response, right? It was such a simple analysis, but at the same time, it was something that kind of was literally answering a business need, right? Like, it wasn't, like we didn't do this, the most complex thing we did was change addresses to geocodes and run through an API. There was no crazy AI, deep learning, all of that, which, by the way, I'm a statistician, I love that, like I read that. But this was so impactful and it was so simple. And so that decision was made right there, and that kind of fell in line with the vision that we had, to be able to kind of provide these decision makers with the data to make those decisions that's gonna affect the employees, right? And for me, I felt like, you know what, like when I started thinking about the presentation, I was like, I need to show something like this. And now, here's the amazing thing. As we are moving employees across the organization, literally we've gotten like, I don't know, like 10 requests in the last week. Like, hey, can we do this analysis on this set of employees or this, you know, and we're like, wow, that's amazing, because now they're realizing like this is actually an important thing for the employees. This is an actually important way to make decisions and where you want to place your employees, because this actually affects them. And so that's kind of why I feel I want to share this, because I think it's important to kind of realize that a lot of times the analysis that actually brings a lot of impact isn't the most fancy analysis, right? Like I've presented at ONA in different conferences, which we have done complex things and resume, like all those things, right? That's great. But I feel like this is something that I was like, wow, this is something I'm proud of as a team, because we did something like this. And it's simple, but has a lot of value as well. How am I on time? I think I might be at time. So, but yeah. So again, no time to talk about network analysis. But anyways, I just want to share that with you all. And yeah, thank you for listening. Any questions about anything?
What are the requests you get? You said you had a flood of other requests
Yeah.
for analysis after this one.
Yeah, so we got some for like, can we do it on like employees in Europe, like in London or in San Francisco, and so we're like, oh yeah, so we started kind of creating like these products around the different like for different like regions as well, which is amazing, right? Like, because they're actually thinking about that and how it's going to affect the employees. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a combination of both, right? So a lot of times, yeah, some businesses might come straight to us and ask us, and you know, we have a ticketing system. Otherwise, we're gonna get like pinged all the time. So they come to us, submit a ticket, and then we kind of go from there. But at the same time, I think what we're trying to do is we have the HR business partners that work with different like teams, right? And so we try and work through them. So any kind of analysis that we have is kind of goes to the HR BPs. We work with them, and then they kind of work with the business as well, back and forth. But yeah, we have some certain relationships that we've formed over time, over like the last couple of years. They just come, they know me like, oh, hey, Joseph, like, and we're like, okay, let's see what we can do, right? But it's a combination of both, I would say. Yeah. So, you know, as you probably know, I can't say much about that, right? And it's not much I don't know anything. But I would say in terms of, like for us, like we just focus on like bringing value to the employees. That's just so. Cool projects like this is what I'm focusing on. That's just really out of my pay range, really. So I'm just happy to be here, really. Yeah, no, we had certain different, we had a few iterations of the database, and we're still even getting better at it, right? But from like zero to kind of a place where I started working, I would say about like 6 to 9 months, somewhere there. So let's say by a year, like we had like a solid, like, you know, we had relationships defined and things like that. But it took at least 6 to 9 months to kind of create that, just because of the different like sources that we had. And then you have to kind of do a lot of auditing and things like that. So, but like there's no better time to start than now. Like you start now, 6 months from now, you'll be where you want to be. But if you're just like, I don't know, then you just never get to that point. And we didn't want to we wanted to stop doing stuff manually. Because for me, it stressed me out. Like I like automation. So yeah. POC, the power of the POC. I can't stress that enough, right? Like, you know, we had certain things whereby we knew that, okay, what the business needs, right? Like we were paying attention. So we have questions like, hey, can I see the headcount of this by this by this, or can I see this? And we'll build those analyses, right? And that was fine. But we also kind of paying attention to kind of what was going on. And then we'll build products and we'll go present and say, hey, we have this for you. And they're like, oh, that's good. Can I have this? Can I add that to that, right? Or when someone came to us, we created a POC and give them, and they're like, oh, can I add this to that? Over time, it was just like, wow, well, like, we want this from you. I'm like, well, like, if 8 of you want stuff from me, there's only like 4 of us. So if you want to kind of give you guys this in the next year even, right? right? We need more resources, like literally. And they're like, okay, yeah, you can have more, right? So I think it was a combination of that because yeah, it got to a point where we were delivering a lot of value, but our time to deliver started becoming longer and longer because we just had a lot of projects and not enough people. And so we were like, look, if you want us to kind of deliver faster, you need to give us some more resources. But it started with the POC. Yeah, yeah. Workdays are ATS HRS right now. Yeah, and then they're like we use Postgres. Yeah, Postgres. We have like Hadoop, Hive as well for some of the larger data sets, but it's literally AWS Postgres.